Hey everyone, hey Breanna.
Hello.
Thanks for jumping on with me today. How you doing today?
Wonderful. We've got a little bit cooler weather here in California, so it's been nice, although we're going right back into the heat this weekend, but it's been a
Yeah,
good
I know.
week.
I feel like it always, I'm also out in California. It always gets cool during the week, and then as soon as the weekend hits, it just gets unbearably hot. I
You're
don't know
so
how that
right.
works, but
You're so
yeah.
right.
So it's funny because we technically met on LinkedIn. Do you remember how we met?
I remember your post that you tagged me in just absolutely blew me away as you quoted something that I had said from a DTCX uh, speaking event that I was at. And we immediately clicked at that moment. And it was the best thing ever.
Yeah. Actually, I pulled it up uh, right before the event. So what I remember, I was sitting in the audience. I think it was the gorgeous DTCX event. You were speaking, and the quote that caught me was phone support. It's a channel people want to use, so why aren't you offering it? And then as soon as you got off stage, you were like rushed to the crowd, and I was like, that's a really awesome quote. So I put it on LinkedIn. And then we somehow, I think, caught up on DMs afterwards, and then it began. I'm curious. It's been a year now. Does that quote still hold true? Is phone support something that you think is something every brand should be doing?
100%. Yeah, no, and I think I said this at that event too is wherever your customers want you, you need to be. Now, I think today we're all getting more innovative on how we can be everywhere while still minimizing costs, right? And increasing efficiency. So 100% phones is just that thing. And especially depending on the type of brand you're working at, sometimes it's just easier to pick up a phone for people. Some people are just wired like that, or they just want to pick up a phone and call you. So, absolutely, if your customers want to leverage that channel, you should be offering that for sure.
Yeah, it's always interesting because we when we talk to brands, there's a fear of getting like putting phones on the website, putting a phone number because customers are going to call it.
For
And
sure.
how I always thought of it is, well, if you're going to do something that you know customers are going to use, maybe you should do it, right? It's
Right.
kind of a strong indicator. Have you at True Classic had have you guys had phones since day one, or was it something you rolled out as you expanded?
Yeah, we didn't have phones as day one. It was kind of one of those things where I myself had thought, oh, we're kind of like it's the sign of the times. We're moving on. We're more efficient without phones. And one of our co-founders, Nick, just kind of like challenged my thoughts on that of, but but why wouldn't you? Like, let's offer everything. And I really stopped and thought about it. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like if we want to be the best in class, then we have to be everywhere. And even in those channels that are more cost, right? Phones, everybody knows, is more of a cost because of the time frame that a call takes versus an email. But it was actually kind of like a pleasant surprise once we did go to phones. It wasn't so overwhelming and scary as everybody initially thought. I come from the days where we had to work with less, and so I'm always very geared toward that. How can we get things done quicker, easier, less painful, and then obviously from a cost perspective, more efficient. So when we did turn on phones, I think it had to have been in 2020 that we turned on phones. It wasn't as scary and overwhelming, but over the course of the years, it's definitely been something that we've had to get really creative with because again, it is a higher cost to offer phones in some cases.
Gotcha. And do you see a different type of contact potentially coming to phones, or do you see a pretty natural distribution of like contacts going to other channels versus phone?
Yeah, we definitely do not have the volumes that we see across our other channels. I know myself as a consumer, like I don't ever want to have to pick up the phone and call anybody, but if they have any sort of just like efficiencies that make it easy, then 100% I'll be about it. But we definitely have a significant amount of our volume coming over to phones. And when I say it, probably 5% of our volume. So it's certainly enough to know, like, okay, this is a great channel. We're absolutely going to keep offering it. We wouldn't pull back on that. But it's definitely not as heavy as a volume as, say, email, for instance.
Right. Absolutely. And so we met at DTCX. We both saw eye to eye on phones, and then it took a few months, and eventually, true, we were speaking. You were like, "Hey, this is something Flip. This being Flip is something we'd love to try." What was the pain point, or was this kind of the state of phones at the time that made you kind of come to the conclusion, "Hey, this is something that I want to try. Let's see how it's going to work."
Yeah, we basically had three people on phones, right, staggered throughout the shifts. And we were struggling with being able to hit like a acceptable call volume where we weren't missing a significant amount. So you missed calls means somebody calls in and your agent's on with another customer, and then the other two are potentially on calls or callbacks. So they get routed to voicemail. You have to then listen to that voicemail and then be able to call that customer back. So we tried to get pretty strategic and scrappy on our end to lower that. A lot of times the voicemails are hangups, so it's just like a total waste of your time. Um, so I was really interested in thinking, like, okay, everybody out there knows, like, I'm very motivated by innovation, right? How can we get more done with less? So when we talked about, and I think I did a podcast initially, you guys
Yeah.
never even
Yeah.
tried to pitch me or anything. And then I was like, no, really, like, I want to know about this because I wanted to understand, is there a better way that I could be doing this with less agents and being able to not miss those calls? Like, how can you, I don't want to have a call center, like, we don't have that big a volume, but how can we be, better using our time? And so that's what really sparked my interest. And then I think just where we took it from there was what I'm most excited about, because really, like, it's just a no-brainer
Yeah.
from my perspective.
And in our early conversations, one thing I realized, I guess there were two things I realized from True Classic. One was you guys are at the forefront of like any new technology. A lot of times, like I hear about it and then I'll start hearing brands talk about it. I was speaking to you and you were telling me like, oh, we're trying this and that. And I'm like, how can you possibly manage so many technologies at the same time? The other thing I noticed is how revenue focused you are from a CX perspective. So a lot of brands we work with just look at CX as a cost center. And
Right.
not only were you looking at managing all of these incoming support requests you're receiving, but also at the same time looking how can we leverage CX as actually a revenue generator. And so when we thought about implementation and we thought about phasing in automation, that was a big thing that I was like, wow, this could be something really interesting we could figure out here. So we split implementation when we finally said, okay, let's launch automation. Let's see how we can help True Classic. We split into kind of a two-phase implementation. And phase one was let's automate those tier one calls. Let's get as much automation as we can and try to reduce the amount of non-revenue generating calls coming to the agents and get the revenue generating ones to there. And I think our initial automation rate was somewhere in the 30 to 40% range.
Mhm.
Curious, what was the internal reaction when we first released automation? How did the customers react? How did the agents react?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the agents were so simultaneously. You talk about just all of the tech stack, and then simultaneously, I was swapping out an entire CX team. So
wow,
right as we did this integration, I was going through that, and it couldn't have been better timing because it really enabled us to lower that volume because we were automating all of those calls, and that helped with a brand new team. So the team was really excited about it. My CS manager was like, "Oh my gosh, this has been great." And I know she's been partnering with Flip too to try to tweak and to understand, where we may need to adjust, or being able to pull like the analysis and understand where she needs to shift the team. So we certainly saw right away, just like, oh wow, this is great. Being able to take like the low hanging fruit, get them an automated response that serves the need, like, where's my order? Or how do I do a return? Like those that, again, take time, that nobody needs to necessarily talk on the phone to answer that question. And the goal is obviously get the customer taken care of as quickly as possible. So while, we're not physically having a phone conversation with the customer, they're taken care of and solved for. I think customers were very responsive to that. We did not really hear any negative backlash, which I was very, very excited about, because for me, automation, it always runs that risk. We're in the place of service, and we want to be very human centric. I think having a human person assist you is so much more meaningful than having to have automation. So I'm really particular about the way we push automation. So knowing that the customers were digging it, knowing that our team had so much removed off of them, was again just a win-win all the way around.
Right. And that brings up a good point. Skepticism that automation sometimes receives is it removes the human aspect of the interaction. What would you say to those skeptics now that we've been running it for solid 6 months, if not more, about that skepticism?
So I think the way that you break it down is it really enables your team to focus on the more impactful conversations. And I think we can prove that in showing Flip is pushing to our agents either frustrated customers where AI knows, like, okay, this isn't a good situation, immediately hand it off to an agent, or a potential sales opportunity. Again, revenue driving, right? This is a potential lead, pushing it off to an agent, which we've seen has made a significant impact. And what that means is all of the easy, less effort conversations that customers are calling about are still being addressed and handled. They're getting their responses timely, way quicker than they would have should they fall into a phone queue and have to leave a voicemail and we call them back, God knows when. So certainly to me, the automation allows for, yes, if it's a situation that needs one-on-one human interaction, it's going to be prioritized to that specific team. And that team is more capable to handle those conversations. And the outcome is so much stronger than if we were just picking up physical phone calls and not being able to differentiate. So it's certainly something that everybody needs to think about, because at the end of the day, your revenue is your bottom line. So if you're seeing that impact on those key conversations over the simple wismos and returns and little questions that you can automate, then it's again a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Those are all great points. So, and you touched on phase two of our kind of implementation, where we then went and said, so phase one, we automated as many calls as we could, and then the ones we couldn't automate, we forwarded them onto the agents. In phase two, in phase one, we went from about a 65% missed call rate, reduced it by about 25%, but the missed call rate was still pretty high. And so, given you're so revenue focused, the task we were kind of looking at is how can we take these remaining calls, the calls that we're not automating, but otherwise still might be missed, and is there a way to prioritize them? And what we were able to do is we said, well, if somebody's calling and we can pretty much figure out that there may be revenue associated with this call, let's get it to an agent right away. But then the other side of it is the human element of,
Right.
how about if somebody calls and they're frustrated? What if somebody's calling with a complaint? Those should also go to an agent right away. And so by taking what we would consider the most important or the most pressing or revenue generating calls off the top, we then were left with a pretty wide range of calls that we were not exactly P1. They were something that could be dealt with in another channel. They could be just a suggestion and so forth. And so what we did was what we internally call NOAA. Our engineers love acronyms. No operator available handling. It's a fancy name for advanced voicemails. And so what that did was, for anything that didn't fall in the frustrator sales bucket, we went ahead, took a transcription of what the customer needed, left a ticket in Zowie that then another agent, an agent that wasn't necessarily on the phones, could then respond to.
Right.
How did that second phase impact your metrics? What was the agents' and customers' response to all of that?
So we were able to reduce our 3 phone agents to 1. And as you can imagine, significant impact there in your bottom line, right? And then we were able to obviously push through more efficiencies. So, because our cost per ticket is so low across other channels, and because we are so centric on productivity and efficiencies, whenever one of those calls comes in transferred to another agent, they're getting a very quick response, having conversation, fixing the issue, addressing the question, whatever it may be. We saw, and of course, you guys also helped us implement that, because CSAT in phones was not previously a thing, even back when I was on Gorgeous, that nobody pushes CSAT to phones. We were able to then really gauge how are the customers responding to this, which is a huge significant driver. How to You want to know, is my customer responding to AI or to automation? Is it a good experience? And seeing that both our agents were obviously loving it and our customers were really receptive to it, it was an absolute win. And then obviously being able to see the reduction in our missed calls, which was my primary focus from the beginning in all of this, was a huge win for us.
Yeah, yeah. It comes to in one of our prior conversations when we first implemented it. I think it was Jordan. Shout out to Jordan, who was working really closely with us on the implementation. She said we went from having 3 agents that could answer a phone call by taking the non-urgent calls, transferring them to another channel. When we say transferring them to another channel, it's commonly email, chat, or a more affordable channel. Now all 15 agents could work those
Yep.
calls.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, customer wins. It
Yep.
seems like we have a question from
Yeah.
Jennifer. Our
This is
age
such a
demo.
good one.
Go ahead, take it.
Yeah. So your age demographic doesn't like AI. I totally get it. I can relate. Oftentimes I can age myself. I have built our AI, and this is the thing: is you really want to partner with people that are going to work for you, and not tell you kind of how their AI is set up. So we've been, and Sam knows this, we've been very just upfront of how we want it to look and feel. So obviously, like, website experience is one thing. That's a very humanized experience. For the phones, it's the same thing. Sam and I talked about that. I'm like, what does it sound like? Does it sound like a robot? No, it's a human voice. We've really built that so that, yes, many people may know that it's automated, but it's not like the IVR that some of us that may be a little older grew up with. It's definitely not that feel, especially because it's going to call them by their first name. It's going to know the order information, and it's going to relate to that. So it's essentially just like you were to have a conversation with somebody on the phone. And I think that is the difference. Plus, when you look at that, measure the performance, we all think, oh, they're not going to like it. They're not going to like it. It comes back and they like it, and it's okay. And if you have maybe 1-2% that aren't liking it, I think the cost savings is well worth the 1-2% that may not prefer it. And again, AI is going to read and know, oh, this is Bob again. Bob doesn't like automation, so I'm going to immediately route him to an agent. But I think you never know until you try it.
Yeah. Yeah. All great points and great question, Jennifer. Another way to also look at it is looking at what the incentives have been of prior systems that all of us have used, as well as the elderly. Typically, one, from a billing model perspective, the old billing model pre kind of what Flip introduced in the space was per minute. So essentially, vendors are incentivized to keep us in the IVR. And what that does is it creates those loops we get when we call banks, when we call airlines, and so forth. But when you take a approach of let's just help the customer as quick as we can, and what that means is if we think with certainty we can help that customer, let's do it. If not, let's transfer them to the appropriate queue, like Breanna mentioned. What that creates is that somebody that might be a skeptic or somebody that we might think might not actually be a user of the product, they're pleasantly surprised and then continue using it. So something like an elderly caller, we see a lot of them are a lot of the elderly demographic tend to call about like, where's my order? But when they're greeted immediately with their name and then told right away, hey, your order's arriving on Tuesday, and we see there's a second package that's coming on Thursday, that's when we then hear on our end something like, oh my God, thank you. And you get you get positive feedback from it. So I think it's just flipping the script and realizing that the incentives of the old school IVR systems and the incentives of innovation that has now come are completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like it's really easy with today's tech stack to be able to categorize your customers. Jennifer, if you know like a particular segment of your customers are going to want a live agent, like it's super easy to just add that tag on the customer profile, and Flip will push that into the appropriate phone team instead of, pushing for the automation. But again, I think your customers would definitely be pleasantly surprised with the experience. I was actually blown away and thought, wow, this is crazy. And I'm a huge skeptic. So definitely test it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So coming back to the phase two of the implementation, one big change was also to agents, right? So agents were used to their email flow, you guys using Zowie as a help desk, and we all of a sudden took a bunch of phone calls, transferred them to email, and now all 15 agents are needing to deal with those. What was the feedback from agents? Was there any change in their flow? Did they like it? Did it take time to get them onboarded? Curious how that went.
Yeah, no, it was pretty seamless. I think most agents are very, adaptable to change. But for this particular one, it was literally just pushing a transfer, and it's all automated. They have all of the insight and recap that they need. They didn't have to sit there and listen to a voicemail. Everything's transcribed. It's just, again, all of the insight that they need is at their fingertips. Obviously, we have Zowie implemented. So again, any order processing and everything is done. But they certainly have been huge fans of the shift, and it's certainly created and enhanced the phone culture, of okay, I've got to be on phones. We like to swap out the agents too in the phones kind of teams, so that way everybody gets accustomed to it. And we just have agents that they're loving phones. It's a great experience. It's not so stressful anymore, right? I've got 70 voicemails that I got to go through and call back. And so it's really made their life more efficient. And we've seen the productivity metrics just increase significantly on phones. Because again, you're spending time on a phone line. Typically, you're going to have a longer resolution time. We've seen that drop significantly, in addition to our agents' productivity increase.
Looks like we have another question. When you applied advanced voicemail, what % did your ticket volume increase?
That's a great question. So when we applied the advanced voicemail, that's a good question. I will look, but it wasn't significant at all because obviously I didn't have to increase staffing or anything for that. But I could probably look at that, huh, Sam, and figure out. I closed my
Yeah,
Slack,
and
so it wouldn't interrupt me. But I can tap Jordan and ask her.
cool. And then while you do that, one clarification on advanced voicemail. So another thing that we look at Flip is the account match rate. I believe the account match rate at which your classic is about 60%. So that is of the people that call, what percentage of the time can we match them with account in your OMS? That way, when we do this advanced voicemail, when we submit the ticket, we submit it with all of the customer's information. So the agent just emails the customer's email on file. The agent doesn't, with this advanced voicemail, actually, just to clarify, need to call back that customer. But great question, and when we get those stats, we'll let you know. So, we get another one.
Yeah, this is a big one. So we do phones. We got to the point before Flip where we were like, oh my gosh, we have to answer phone calls on Saturdays and Sundays. We tried to do phones just Monday through Friday. So we got to the point where volumes were so high on off hours that we were calling people back or addressing voicemails on Saturdays just to try to get ahead of it before Monday. So now it is so much less of an impact for our agents because the automation is answering all the time. And it will say, like, after hours, agents aren't available, you can leave a voicemail. But the majority of those are self-serving, meaning they're letting the automation help serve their question. And then so that has significantly dropped tremendously, which is why we're so floored about it, because coming in on a Monday to a backlog of voicemails and calls was so overwhelming, and it just tanked our productivity on Mondays. To now, we don't have that at all.
That's awesome to hear, and great question. So with a
Yeah.
few minutes left, want to get to the meat and potatoes of it, metrics. So we started pre-flip, mid-60s missed call rate. Where are we now? And have you seen any actual revenue increase from introducing flip as well?
Yes, I just pulled this, which I thought was crazy insane. So Zowie does revenue. It's so much more factual than how we had previously done, kind of like how the revenue was pulled with our previous help desk. So I'm really excited. We went from like 4,000 a month in revenue on phones. Like that's basically what that means is after our customer hangs up with our agent, this is the revenue that was generated after that conversation. We went from 4,000 to 8,000 in just phone call, like phone queue. And
Wow.
I know. And so that's certainly a significant driver um, across everything. So certainly taking those calls that AI knows are going to be sales opportunities and pushing them to a live agent certainly works.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's 100% increase. So with 2 minutes to go, big question. You have pretty much completely overhauled your tech stack over the last year. And I've been amazed at how much you've been able to do. Um, Black Friday, Cyber Monday is coming up. How are you feeling? What are you looking forward to? Would love to get your
I'm
thoughts.
looking forward to this. Phones are always going to be heavier during peak. People are, where's my order? I order this as a gift. It's just a significant increase. I am so excited that now I have confidence in knowing, look, we're going to have significant volumes everywhere else, but this piece is going to drive down the time spent for these agents. They are not going to have to worry about the daunting voicemails. I checked, we come in on Monday to maybe 2 to 3 voicemails. A freaking Monday after being off from Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, all the way to Monday, we come back to 2 to 3 voicemails. Like, I just, we were
Yeah,
hundreds
that's
of
pretty
voicemails
amazing.
previously. Yeah. So we've only increased our volume by maybe 700 tickets in the pushing, which is nothing. Like in my world, that's nothing. Um, so knowing that Black Friday is knocking on our door, we are beyond thrilled to know that volume of phones that generally just sits right here on our shoulder and hi, it's going to be so much more efficient. Our agents are going to be in a really great place mentally. Our customers are going to be serviced quicker, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Customer centric, they're our top priority. So I'm excited.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't think we could have closed any better. Thank you to everybody for the great questions. Thank you, Breanna, for joining us today. It's always great to chat, and
Thank
good luck to
you.
everybody for Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.